A video clip came across my desk. And by across my desk, I mean I was on YouTube binge watching videos like most of us. But on this particular video, it is a clip of Kamala Harris saying some pretty damning things regarding her policies for or not for Black people. And I have to give credit to Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report. I actually saw the clip on his video. And so we're going to take a look at that and then we'll go over it.
You ask her what she means by that, it's not really reparations. Case in point.
Do you support reparations for Black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination, segregation, and now we have segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, Black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of Black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit Black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No.
So, yeah, that is a bit awkward, but more than awkward, it's very telling, right? Because for the longest time, or at least for the last couple of weeks, people have been saying over and over and over and over again that Kamala Harris is for reparations, at least in some form or fashion. Now, let's be clear about something. The whole point about that question on reparations was to say, are you going to advocate for or pass policies or sign off on policies that will specifically benefit the Black community, given the tumultuous history of the United States and its part in basically deterring the Black community from any type of long-term security, success, or stability? And that answer, even for Kamala, that's not what I was expecting. She got really high. Let's be very clear on something. Let's be very clear. If it helps Black people, it helps everybody. If it helps Black people. She would, when people, my old sergeant when I was a paralegal in the Army used to say, we call that the Humvee, because it's time to when you're stressing out the Hummer, the H1s that we use in the Army too much, that belt starts spinning faster and faster and faster when you're trying to come up with something to say, because you realize you done said something and you probably shouldn't have said it. That's what just happened. That screech that your car makes when that belt is bad. Yeah, that's what happened. So, that's what happens when you're pandering, first of all. Because remember, Kamala has been pandering to Black people basically since she launched her election. She announced it on MLK Day. Once again, the worst election announcement in history. That's the stupidest decision any Black person could have made. And then, of course, she's been pandering to Black people ever since. CNN and MSNBC has been basically saying that the Black vote is in the bag for Kamala Harris. And if it isn't going to Kamala Harris, they argue that it will go to Cory Booker. And because of that, that's why Kamala Harris brings up her parents' civil rights record. And then she tries to directly associate that with how she would behave as president, which is obviously not the case, because she has held elected office. She did have a chance to act on her parents' civil rights record and shows that she is representative of the record her parents supposedly established, and she showed that she's not that. But it also shows that she was trying to then switch and pander to the quote-unquote white working class. I don't have a problem with advocating for the white working class. I don't have a problem with advocating. You can do both. You can advocate for the white working class and still advocate for pro-black issues as it pertains to black people in the United States of America, because the experience of black people in the United States of America is unique to those of the white working class, and the experience of the white working class, their experiences are unique as well. And so it's okay to multitask. Nobody's really arguing about that. But when you're trying to pander, this is how it comes out. Because she doesn't genuinely believe in these talking points, and they are just that, talking points. So she tries to pander and gets caught in a rut. And she tells on herself it was a Freudian slip that, interestingly enough, no one else caught. I missed that quote. I'm glad that Mike caught it. And I guess it's because my face has been, I've been waist deep and neck deep really in Kamala news and Tulsi news and Bernie news and AOC. So it's hard to keep up with everything. But the fact, I'm very grateful that Mike did catch that clip because it's telling. She literally says, I'm not going to do anything just for black people. You know what that means, black people, in case you were curious. That means she doesn't have a black agenda. That means she is pandering and was pandering to us based off of nothing other than what she perceives to be her blackness. But what's even more interesting to me is the fact that, could you imagine if Bernie Sanders said something like this? Could you imagine if Tulsi Gabbard said something like this? Hell, even Elizabeth Warren. Could you imagine the hellfire that Bernie would go through if he said specifically, if you think I'm going to do anything specifically for black people, then don't think that, because I'm not going to. He would get torched. Tulsi would get torched. And I want to make a distinction really fast between the differences in coverage. Kamala said something like this, it gets no coverage at all. But then she did get favorable coverage for her advocacy, quote unquote advocacy, for reparations. However, Bernie got slammed because he asked, well, what is Kamala and Elizabeth Warren talking about for reparations? And they were talking about, quote unquote, reinvesting in the black community, breaking down racist institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Bernie has been talking about that. So he said he advocates for that, but he doesn't advocate for cash checks. But neither does Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren. But those comments were only the only comments that were held accountable as far as not giving out checks were Bernie Sanders. Then on the far other end of that fence is Tulsi. Tulsi Gabbard is actually the only one of the presidential candidates who signed on to a bill, co-sponsored a bill, and is pushing for reparations actively. Actually told me that these are issues that are important to her. And she was looking forward to talking about this on her town hall. And guess what happened? Not one single question about a black agenda, which Tulsi is in favor of, about reparations, which Tulsi is also in favor of. And so the only one that actually has tangible proof that she's willing to put her name on the dotted line in favor of reparations hasn't been asked about it at all. Isn't that interesting? And like I said, not only was she not asked about that, But she wasn't asked any questions about any black agenda or by any black people outside of a question that had nothing to do with black issues. Which is once again interesting because when Bernie was doing his town hall, they kept trying to attack his whiteness with women of color and black people in general. And then with Kamala, they kept trying to prop her blackness up. But in the end, it's clear to me that Kamala's blackness was merely a prop. Because we have candidates, or at least tangibly, we have a candidate who's for forming a committee for reparations to study it and then to enact it in whatever form that may take. We have a candidate. They won't talk about her. They won't even ask the question on CNN's town hall, but then they turn around behind our backs and pretend that Kamala is for black people and that she has won our vote. But she specifically says she's not going to do anything for black people. But that just once again goes back to an overarching theme when it comes to these type of conversations. Reparations, Medicare for all, a lot of these types of things, money in politics, things like that. But for issues that are divisive it's not divisive by nature. I'm not going to say that. It's not nature that causes it to be a divisive issue. It's poor education. It's conditioning, and that is all done on purpose. So it's not divisive by nature. However, the conversation, the overarching theme is that they're trying to use reparations to divide us. All of us. Whether you're for it, whether you're not for it, even if you're quote unquote against it. They're trying to use the conversation to divide, and they're trying to basically muddy the waters so that you believe one candidate's for reparations, but the other candidate isn't, and then this candidate is for it, but then she's actually not for black people. Because then what does the conversation become about? Do you support reparations? And the candidates who don't support it and the candidates who do support it. That would be the only conversation. And is it wrong to support it? Is it not wrong to support it? And the waters get so muddied that the candidates then get into office and say, well, it's too divisive of an issue and we never really got to discuss the substance of the policy, so we never really got to it, blah, 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 blah. Rather than discussing the substance of the policy, which they never did with Kamala, which they never did with Elizabeth Warren. Bernie didn't get it 100% right. I was disappointed in his answer on the Breakfast Club, but at least he's asking the right questions. And Tulsi did get it right and has been getting it right. But they don't want to ask her in a nationally televised town hall meeting because they know that black people would swing into her favor just by being willing and open to have the conversation and yield the floor to the experts in the black community and the experts about reparations to go forward with that conversation. They don't want her to get that. And it would be a boost, trust me. It would have been one because people have been asking. And so overall, this lets us know it's very revealing about Kamala, but it's very revealing about the establishment in general. They're always going to try and use the issues that matter most to us to divide us. So it's important that we analyze everything, even when it personally affects us, from an objective standpoint. Now, your experiences may be subjective, and that's fine. But when we're talking about who can help us, who can't, who is on our side and who isn't, who's an ally, who's an adversary, people will throw out words like reparations, but that doesn't mean they believe in them. People will say they care about black issues. They'll invoke their blackness. They'll try and pull your heartstrings. But at the end of the day, they're not really for us. Just like Hillary Clinton, remember? For women. But then the women on the Clinton Foundation were actually being paid far less than their male counterparts. She's for women, but she participated actively in the bullying of Monica Lewinsky. That's what it looks like. She was never going to advocate for issues specific to women, but it sounded good in a soundbite and in a campaign ad. So just be mindful of that. Thanks for tuning in, and always remember, people, find your balance. Peace. Thank you for watching that segment of Mikase Sukasa. Help us reach our goal of 500 patrons. You can do so by donating as little as $1 by clicking on the Patreon link in the description below. Don't forget, join us on Roku and JustNForm. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.